It's terrifying. It has escalated in a way we never really imagined.
Thank you to the founding sponsor of unDivided, 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com. Pot is, of course, legal in Washington state, and it's an issue that has become less and less controversial, I think, as the years tick by since legalization. But one persistent issue remains, and in fact is getting worse, and that is the sudden spike in pot shop robberies. There was a horrible one in Bellevue, Washington this past week, which is, if you're not familiar, is a suburb of Seattle. Take a look at the video. You see the two robbers come in. There's also a guy outside in a getaway car holding the store employees at gunpoint. You can see, I mean, you can't hear anything in the video, but you can see the absolute terror that those employees are put through. And then after the fact, you saw the money that was taken out of the safe. Well, there was a tracker put in that bag of money. So police were able to locate the suspects. A shootout ensued where one of the suspects allegedly shot at officers. That suspect, a 19-year-old, was then shot and killed by police. But it just shows how dangerous these robberies are, not just for the pot shops, but for the public at large, and certainly for police officers who are left responding to them. By some counts, there have been more than 70 pot shop robberies in Washington state just since the beginning of the year. The issue, of course, is that marijuana isn't legal at the federal level. And so you have these pot shops who cannot participate in the banking system. They can't take credit cards or debit cards from customers. So they have this huge influx of cash, and the bad guys know that. I spoke today with Vicki Christophersen. She's the executive director of the Washington Cannabusiness Association, about their efforts to try to change this at the federal level.
It's been an issue since legalization occurred. And really, the fundamental problem stems from the fact that cannabis is still illegal at the federal level. And we can speak more about the details there, but we always knew that was going to be a problem. And early on, actually, we're very lucky in Washington state that the several credit unions have chosen to bank with the industry. One of them sits on our board, and we have several that are members of the association. The credit unions have, at great risk, chosen to bank with the industry because of the uncertainty at the federal level. And that really solved a lot of the initial problems, which were just simply having a bank. In early days, people were taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash to the Liquor and Cannabis Board to pay their taxes. I mean, literally bags of cash to pay taxes. And we were lucky that those credit unions decided to bank with the industry. So now business to business transactions can occur via EFTs or checks. So when a producer is, let's say, delivering a product to a retail store, most of those transactions can occur without cash. But that left still the retail issue, which I can get into more detail why at retail stores we have that problem. But it's been a problem for years. And, we've seen as early as 2017 violent crimes associated with pot shops, and particularly around cash. So
there was a video that really made the rounds this week of the pot shop robbery in Bellevue. Have you watched it?
Yes.
When you watch that, what goes through your mind?
It's terrifying. And I feel I'm very concerned for our members and for their employees. This has been an issue we have been trying to raise attention to for some time, not just this year, but it has reached a fever pitch this year. It has escalated in a way we never really imagined. It is clear that opportunistic criminals have figured out that this is a target, and they are continuing to do it. This reached a different level this week with actual death. And the sense of urgency for some action, both at the state level and the federal level, has become just, I don't know what to do about it, but it is time for some action. We tried to do some things in this legislative session. We're unsuccessful. And again, we're working on the Safe Banking Act at the federal level, which needs to happen. That would take the cash out of the retail stores at the level that it is.
And as you mentioned, it reached a new level this week, and people need to realize, regardless of how they feel about the pot industry, I don't know, is the pot industry still controversial? I guess at the federal level, but what happened in this Bellevue case, you had not only the people in the pot shop put at risk, but there was a flight from justice that resulted in a pursuit, exchange of gunfire with police. Someone was killed. Police could have been killed. Do you know what to attribute the sudden rise and spike in these pot shop robberies to?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the first is symptomatic of the larger problem we're seeing with the rise in crime generally, right? And you've covered a lot of those issues. And, we really need to find balance again in terms of holding people accountable for these kinds of crimes. And that is not just in the cannabis industry. We're seeing organized retail theft across our state and across the country, and other brazen crimes. So there's that issue, coupled with the fact that cannabis shops are holding a lot of cash at the end of the day. And it is an opportunity. It's uncomfortable for our members. They sometimes say, boy, I don't know if I want you out talking about this, because then more people will know that this is an opportunity. But the balance is we have to talk about it if we're going to change it. So I think the cash is a big issue. Most of the crimes that occur are for the cash. They're not coming for product. Sometimes they take product, but it's a afterthought. It's the cash that they're interested in. So we really need to get the cash out of the shops to the level that it is right now.
Yeah, it should be non-controversial. And so when we look at the Safe Banking Act, I know that Washington State's Treasurer Mike Pellicati was in D.C. lobbying for that. How hopeful are you? First of all, what does it do? And then how hopeful are you that there's enough support to get it through?
Right. Yeah, it's a very simple piece of legislation. It basically states that a bank that banks with an industry, with a cannabis industry in a state that has legalized it, is not breaking federal law. Simple. So they don't risk losing those protections that they have. We are very proud. We've been working for several years that every single member of the Washington State delegation, Senate and House, have supported the bill. And it's now passed the House of Representatives 3 times with broad bipartisan support. It is truly a bipartisan bill. And we know the votes are there in the Senate. It just hasn't been brought up for a vote yet in the Senate. And so we really need to move forward with this legislation so we can normalize a bit the interactions with the industry. And you mentioned something a little bit before about, is it controversial? No, I mean, cannabis issues now are bipartisan across the country. And if you look over the history actually of cannabis legislation in Washington State, every bill that passes the legislature is bipartisan on cannabis issues. It's really not a big partisan issue.
That being said, I'll end on a devil's advocate question. There are going to be people who watch this who do not believe that pot should be legal in Washington State, and who believe that these pot shops, because of the situation they're in with banking, are a risk to public safety. What would you say to those people?
Well, we live in a democratic society, and our voters in the state of Washington in 2012 made a very strong support for legalization of cannabis, and also a rethinking in how we look at cannabis as a substance. The war on drugs did not work. And it was really, the whole notion of the initiative was to bring the product into a legal marketplace, regulate it heavily. It's a heavily regulated marketplace, and tax it to provide services that we need in our society, which we have as an industry have complied with and fulfilled that will of the voters. We're now a multi-billion-dollar industry in the state of Washington, providing significant revenue to the state. And I think that the question's been asked and answered. Now we need to work on making it safe and making sure that the employees can go to work and feel safe in their job.